What's up, y'all? Happy Saturday. We're doing a little late afternoon streaming here. It's called a little late afternoon streaming. Today we're going to have a pretty easy day, so I guess you could say. We're going to be covering this new show on Netflix called Devil in Ohio. So we're going to be covering that, and then I'm going to kind of tie it in, kind of loosely, not really, but there are a few ties with this book, Fatal Vision by Joe McGinnis. It's considered one of the big true crime books, if not the number one or the origin of true crime books, because it's about Colonel Jeffrey R. MacDonald, the Green Beret killer down at Fort Bragg. And so that ties in a lot of elements that we've discussed in the past. And I've mentioned this book a bunch of times in the past, but I thought it would be good to go over it today. So yeah, we're just gonna be having kind of a fun day because look, we don't usually do straight up movie analysis here. That's for our homeboy over there, JD, who is obviously the king of all the movie analyzers, right? He's the I guess he's the alpha esalab of movie analyzers, based analyzers. So, but I figured since he's busy with his Orlando event and everybody's kind of chilling on the weekend, especially who couldn't make it down there, I thought, you know what, let's just do this because it's 8 damn hours. It's an 8-hour series, and I watched it for y'all. So I thought, man, he doesn't have time to watch this 8-hour series. So why don't we just do it? I guess. So what we're gonna have some fun, I guess, talking about this series, this new series. It's number one. It's trending on Netflix today. So I watched it yesterday and last night, just for y'all. So we're gonna dive deep into that, and then we're gonna cover Fatal Vision here. Which one do y'all want to cover first? I don't know. Maybe we should cover. Should we cover? No, let's just go ahead and do the Netflix first. Before we do that, please make sure you smash that like. You guys, and share the stream. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for chilling. Thanks for coming by afterwards. If you're not here for live, really appreciate you. Thanks for hitting the sub button. Thanks to everybody who has supported me over this 6-month period since we've started. And y'all, again, just before we get started here, we're making some good progress. We are in the home stretch here till we hit the big time, I guess. We are at about 950 subs, so please, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please give me that sub. Click that subscribe button, because we're trying to get up to 1,000. We're in the home stretch here, and as soon as that happens, we're gonna get super chats on YouTube, so that'll be cool. We've got channels. I mean, we're doing pretty well here, you guys. We got 11,000 hours of watch time. We got good number of views on the channel. I think we're doing well, and that's all thanks to y'all, my homies out there. So I appreciate you. Thanks for coming by and just chilling and doing some basement analysis of some of these literary works. Of course, we haven't really covered true crime, and it's such a popular genre. I thought maybe we'd go into a true crime book that goes past, obviously, and goes a little deeper than the sort of normie analysis, the sort of fuzzbead normie analysis that you get of any of these crimes, because this one actually deals with a lot of the stuff that we talk about in our circles. I mean, it's MIC, Phoenix Program, 70s, Green Berets, Ted Gunderson, ritual murders, Satanism. It's all in there. And that's especially true of this Netflix series in terms of some of those things. So let's just go ahead and dive in. And in a minute, I'll get to it in a minute, but I'm going to list off the people who've supported me big time in the past, especially the past few days. Don't forget, once we get up to that 1,000 subs, y'all, we're gonna have our big party, and we got some big things coming up on the channels. So stay tuned, I guess. So all right, so what's this show about? It's called Devil in Ohio, and it's 8 episodes, about 8 hours long. I don't know, 40 minutes to an hour each episode or whatever. And I just watched it because the description of the series kind of seems to be all the stuff that we normally talk about here. But the difference is that it's actually based in, because it's based literary analyzing. It's based in a YA novel And that surprised me a lot. Of course, I haven't read that novel, and it was actually written by the showrunner. The showrunner is this lady Daria something. She's Egyptian. Um, she uh, she did, let's see, she did Castle Rock, which is the Stephen Creeper Kang esque show on Amazon, I guess. She also did. She wrote for Jack Ryan, right? The Tom Clancy show, and so then she wrote this YA novel. And then I read an interview with her, and they said, she said the show is based on some actual ritual murders, cult murders that occurred in Ohio. And they said, really, which one? And she said, oh, I don't know. And that you kind of think, obviously, oh, is this the one that you were in? Is this the one that you did so you could put on the show? I'm being facetious, but it is a little weird. But it does remind me of there is a case that deals with the Mormon Church that occurred in Ohio. I think it was was it in the 80s when they sacrificed a family and then they caught them on the run in the Mexico border. We'll get to that in a little bit. But what happens in the show is basically it's weird because it's aimed obviously at a young audience, okay? And it's not weird in the sense that this is typical for what uh, um, this channel, Netflix, um, the service has been doing now for a long time. And of course, the Isaac and JD and Jamie and Tristan and Kotel, everybody's talked about this, in depth. So I don't need to go into that, into the agenda of that particular service and that their productions. I mean, but I will say that this one is like far out there. It is so blatant. I mean, it's on the surface. It's not even figurative. This is literally what happens in the show. Is the first scene of the show is basically there's a girl in white. She's in like a white robe running through a cornfield, and she's being chased by dogs, and she runs onto a dirt road, and she's picked up. And I'm sure anybody watching this can already guess what the entire show is about just based on that, right? She's obviously running away from a cult. She was chosen to be sacrificed. The cult is going to be a satanic cult. They are in a compound in Ohio, and yet the people in the cult are also various members of society, including the well-to-do people who own certain industries and have their tentacles in the entire town, the city, and then the state. And they're going to be a secret organization, and it's going to be straight up Satanism. And sure enough, that's what happens. Okay, so what happens is, and I'm not giving a review of the show. Obviously, you guys know that I'm not giving a review of the show. I'm giving a analysis of what happens. She ends up at a hospital where she's seen by Bones, right? Emily Deschanel, who, by the way, is like really, I don't know what the deal is with her, but the way that she acts is like everything's expository. It's like you can see, a lot of times in acting, what they say about film and television acting is like it's all in the eyes, right? That's why Michael Caine does that famous video. I've mentioned this before, but it's a classic video if you haven't seen it. Michael Caine is doing I think he's at the actor studio in New York, and it's like from maybe the early 90s, and he's doing a kind of a workshop on how to do film acting, and he says the key to film acting is you don't blink. You don't blink. Look, if something's going on, right? You look in my eyes and you notice I haven't blinked because the camera it's right in the eyes. It's all in the eyes. You tell everything. You could be sad, but you notice I don't blink. I look over here, I look over there. I know, but I don't blink. And if my eyes start to burn, and they won't because I can go forever without blinking. But if they do blink, if there's an explosion behind me, I turn around, I look at the explosion. That's when I blink. Then I turn back around. I haven't blinked. And her thing is like, she's like everything she says is like, oh, so this girl came to the hospital because I am a psychiatrist and I'm going to take care of her in this hospital in this show. And what I think is, I mean, it's like it's crazy, and you start to think, okay, maybe this is her character because her character is obviously damaged, like she's not all there. But that's just the way that it is throughout the show. Now that actually does end up being true. You know that she's also going to have some sort of trauma, and I'll get to that in a minute. But what happens is she she uh she like examines the patient who's been medicated. She's been given, I don't know. Oh, of course they knock her out with tramadol. They don't even they give her tramadol for the pain. Bullshit. Why don't they give her something real? It's just whatever. And and you're like, okay, what's the pain? She's been marked somehow, and of course she has. They kind of lift up the gown, and they don't show it at first, but you're like, I bet they have carved a sigil or a pentagram in this girl's back. And of course they have. That's exactly what happens. Of course, it takes till like episode 2 for them to show that she has a gigantic bloody pentagram carved in her back. And then it takes till like episode 4 for them to go, I think someone did this to her. She didn't do it to herself. Right? So, you know. So anyway, she won't speak. She's catatonic, and of course, the doctor like takes a kind of a weird interest in her. She sort of crosses the lines a little bit in terms of like her physical space and stuff. Um, and then what happens is she ends up like becoming her guardian because the girl's parents won't show up. And like, of course, Emily Deschanel's like, oh, I'm sorry your parents didn't show up to claim you at the hospital. Well, she was running from her parents, dumbass. They're the ones who did it to her. Anyway, so cheers, y'all. So she goes home, and of course, when she goes home to the family, her husband is this guy Sam Yeager, who I recognize from the American Sniper movie because he plays like a 2-second scene in that where he's like, "We're gonna get this son of a bitch," talking about Zarqawi. And then she's got 3 kids. One of the youngest whom is adopted. She's a Chinese girl. She was adopted, so that sort of mirrors her thing. It's like bookends to the children because they have 2 birth children and then they have 2 adopted children on the youngest and the oldest. And then that's going to play a role because the new girl, her name is May, by the way. She's the May Queen, of course. Remember our Zeppelin stream? She's the May Queen. And she's the May Queen because in her flashback scenes, we're later going to see that she has been crowned. She's the crowned and conquering child because she is the chosen one. And by chosen one, you know that it's going to mean, chosen for sacrifice, but it's more than that. She is chosen in terms of like, she's crowned with this crown of like crow feathers. And there's this weird, crow that stands behind the Satan priest in their rituals. Like they've got an upside down cross. They're in an anti-church. They're all wearing black robes. They've got like this crow feathers, and the wings are obviously supposed to be are supposed to represent the burned wings of Lucifer being cast out from heaven by God. And they have a satanic Bible called the Book of Covenants that they wrote it was based on a ritual that occurred in Connemara in the old country, where this guy basically like does a Wicker Man ceremony because his crops wouldn't grow, and he sacrificed his wife to Lucifer, and he burned her alive, and then they have to redo this ritual every few years, and of course she's the one that's going to be chosen for this, and then but she gets away. May gets away, or at least so you think she gets away. And that's never really answered in terms of whether she got away or she is the actual. Well, I'll get to that part. So yeah, it definitely sounds like Netflix. Yeah, of course. And then there are 2 middle daughters, and the older daughter is she's like the high school senior, and she's like all about going to college, and she's interestingly she's going to go to Ohio State. There's a lot of like Ohio State like advertising in this, because like all the kids are really good, they all do well, and I happen to know somebody that plays sports ball for Ohio State. I'm not going to say who it is, but he's big time. So I'm just dropping that there. He's big time, and he's going to be especially huge, big, very famous. But yeah, so he goes to Ohio State, plays sports ball for them, and but the family wants to go there. The girl wants to go there, but then of course there's something weird about the older sister because she's mean to the younger sister, even though they kind of like, they sort of they look very much alike. I mean, they're supposed to be sisters, but she the older sister, you get this kind of hint that she's a little Skittles, even though she's like, the school queen or whatever. And then she goes Skittles fake and gray for Bruno Mars. Uh, and if you see the show, you'll know what I mean. And uh, and then the younger sister is a photog. She's like kind of emo, and she listens to Hole, and go on, take everything I want you to. Right? And she's all mad. She's listening on her headphones. Um, there are weird things in this, like there's a part where like Emily Deschanel, like the cop, there's a cop who like is helping them and he can't cross the county lines to investigate the obvious CHILDABUSE. And of course, the sheriff is like, you cross county lines, you got to stay on the other side. No, dude. Um, and the he later gets a call from Emily Deschanel who says, I need help. They ran me off the road. I'm going to check out the ritual. I don't have my phone. Bye. Well, what are you calling on? Right? So anyway, um, it's really like it seems thrown together, obviously, and like so anyway, okay, so back to what happens. So the May Queen, is ordered to start going to school, and the other daughters are like, oh no, this girl's weird, because she's basically Carrie, also, and so she starts going to school, and the photog girl, like, has to hang out with her. They're in the same grade, and she starts kind of imitating the photog daughter who takes pictures of like, various emo things, and she takes a picture of the girl, and her back is showing, and she doesn't want to show it because she doesn't want to dox the girl that this has happened to her. But then the girl herself, May, like inserts the photo into the packet that they give to the school newspaper, as if they'd have a school newspaper now. It wouldn't be online. It's weird. And by the way, everybody at school is reading it. They're like, oh, look at the newest news in the school printed newspaper. What? And then also they have their little they have like the politics of the cafeteria. Oh, you can't sit here. Seats taken. Seats taken. No, I doubt that's just whatever, man. It's like we're using old tropes. But they make sure to insert a lot of young young cool lingo in there and stuff. Oh yeah, come to the kickback. Wow, that picture you took was really fire. Okay. So anyway, the picture that she took that is so deep, yeah. And the picture that she took that she didn't want to put in there to dox her friend, well, her friend put it in there anyway. And then like it gets published on the cover of the newspaper, and she goes to school and she's like, oh my gosh, she's horrified. But of course, all the emo kids like love, they love like anything salacious, and like everybody at school sees the picture and they go, oh, you're so brave. How did you escape? And all the May Queen can say is, I broke the chain. Right? That's what she says continuously. Now, that makes me think of two things. One is, of course, unbroken chain of the western wind, right? The Dead, man. But really, the unbroken chain, they obviously mean it as the fact that like they have a chain of like in their whatever weird Luciferian family traditions that is supposed to go on. But of course, they would be breaking the chain, but anyway, by sacrificing her because she would be gone, right? But also, the chain is actually the chain that binds her because she's been held captive in this cult. And there are like a million like other KIDS in this cult. And they live in like it doesn't make sense because they live, it's almost like that movie, The Village. Remember the M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong movie, The Village, where they're like inside of a 19th century like compound and they think that like, this is Amish town or whatever. But actually, the people that run it and that are going in and out of it are all like one guy's like a real estate magnate, one guy's a sheriff, they all have jobs like in the outside world. In fact, the son of the main Satanist is the Chad high schooler, which you know right away when you watch it. You're like, oh, of course, this guy's gonna be the son of the cult leader. But how does it make sense that like she was there and that he's a high schooler going back and forth and she saw him every day, but they never? It doesn't make sense. Uh, so anyway, they publish her picture in the newspaper, and then so that makes her cool, even though she's weird. Also, she's the Scarlet Woman. I think I mentioned that. You know, she's a redhead. She's a Scarlet Woman, and and we go through all sorts of I don't know, trials and tribulations within the family, and we find out that the mother, who is a psychiatrist, has to go see a shrink herself. And at some points, the dad says like, yeah, you're not doing this because of her, because you want to save her. It's because of your own issues. And that's like not revelatory. That's like obvious in the show to any of us watching it from the very beginning, because she's kind of dead eyed. The mom is just kind of dead eyed, you know. And we find out that she herself ran away from her ABUSIVE family. Her own dad was a sheriff. There's a scene where like he's running her down with dogs and they trap her in a tree. And he's like, "Oh, you can't get you got to come down from there sometime." And then at one point she's like, it's weird because she seems so much older, but like she's only like 4 years older than me in real life, I guess. But like there's like a flashback scene and she's in her room and she's wearing like, you know, those punk plaid pants, and she's like got a skateboard and stuff, and she's got a picture. She's got like a Pearl Jam poster, and she's like, "I hate you, mom. I hate you, dad," but like for good reason in this family. And her dad comes home, he does all this stuff, and then he like handcuffs her to the radiator, and then the radiator like turns on and it burns, and it leaves this and it burns her, and it leaves, you know, shackle marks on her wrist. And of course, so that's how she like identifies with this May Queen girl. And um but what's stupid is the normal stuff of like, okay, we've got to fill out an 8-hour show, so we're gonna have like, there are scenes where like towards the end of the show, so the dad is like a real estate guy, and he like built a house, and then the house burns down, and then we see, and then when the sheriff is like running through the cornfields, he comes across a footprint and then a bloody knife, and of course that's not enough to get a warrant, even though the blood on the knife matches the May Queen's blood on her back. And they have two sets of fingerprints. One is her because she was carrying the knife because she got away with it, and the other is an unidentified set of fingerprints. That's not enough for a warrant. Yeah, right. So anyway, so what else? So he sneaks in and he like takes pictures of the cult doing one of their sacrifices, and they sacrifice a pig, and then they like, of course, they make a Mephistopheles scarecrow, just like in Lord of the Flies. And then he finds out that they are using the pig. They're like putting it in these vats, and they ought to be consulting our homeboy Tristan over there for what to do with this. He can teach these people how to be normal and actually contribute to society. Instead, they are making glycerin, and he's like, "What's that used for?" And you're like, "Duh." The real estate guy's house just burned down. Somebody burned it down after he met the cult leader that he didn't know he was a cult leader, and he met him in the house, and the guy said, "After the dark night, there shall be a bright, illuminating dawn," or something like that, some kind of Luciferian shit. And you know that's the cult leader. So obviously they're making this for an accelerant or for a bomb, right? And it turns out that's exactly what they're doing. He finds out. Uh, oh, the first time that they have the girl over, they to the house, they are eating like a family dinner, and the girl's like dead-eyed sitting there, and they say, "Hey, do you want to?" She says, "Do you want to say grace?" And the family's like, "No, of course," because they are, you know, they're in like this soulless, you know, modern house or whatever. And then they say, "But you can if you want to." And then they let the May Queen say grace. And what do you think she says? She prays to the like bright and glistening morning star for guidance and power, and to have all of her wishes come true. What the fuck? I mean, and nobody stops her. They're like, "Oh, that's wonderful." And then they copy from Hereditary, because like a crow like flies into the window and essentially makes this weird like, I don't know, this pattern in the window. And then they're like, the crow is sitting there dying, and they're having a discussion on it. But I need to take Bobby to the music lessons or whatever. And instead of putting the bird out of its misery, they're like, let's take it to a shelter. So then they take the bird the bird's sitting there, the bird's like dying. They take this bird to a bird shelter. The bird shelter is run by somebody in the cult. Then the guy ends up bringing it back home, and then the May Queen girl like takes the bird and like sacrifices it and leaves a sigil at a tree stump, just like in True Detective. It's also from Hereditary because like remember she takes the bird and she's always lopping the heads off the birds, and they never like question this. They're like, oh, where did the bird go? It's not the dead-eyed girl that we just brought home. And what ends up happening is there is they get marked, their car gets marked with the sigil, and they're like, oh, what's that? That's a weird design. Somebody must have graffitied our car. No, it's like, then it's up to the cop to do like investigations. Oh, there's one scene where he's like, now this is a pentagram, and a pentagram represents, and he has to like explain it to the other cops. He goes and asks the police detective for if he can get a warrant. And she's like, no, you need to drop the investigation immediately. I never want to hear another word about it. And you're like, yeah, because the lady is part of it, right? She's paid off or she's compromised or she's part of it. It takes him another 2 episodes to get to the point where he realizes that. Then they have Halloween, and one of the cult guys like dresses up secretly as a scarecrow and gives poison candy. Gives a as Norm MacDonald says, razor apple day. Gives poison candy to the littlest one who passes out, and they're just gaslighting the family. They get home and their doors are open. They're like, oh, what's this? And then it's it's Walpurgisnacht, and then Halloween, and then they're like, oh yeah. So here's what else happens. They find out that there was someone who was supposed to be sacrificed. His name was Enoch, and he was a junkie living in a squat house, and the squat house like burned down, but he knew all about the cult or something, or he was in the cult, I don't know. And it turns out that like the family also has something to do with poppy fields and opium, and Enoch like ran away and changed his name and became a priest. And as soon as they go talk to this priest that he's going to be the guy who escaped, but he like is hiding his identity. Takes them till the final episode to go and talk to him, and then he's like, they're like, so what's the deal? Like, what's the deal with this May Queen girl? Like, do you think something bad's gonna happen to her? And he's like, yeah, they're gonna sacrifice her. She's been marked. They did all that stuff because she's the chosen one that they're gonna sacrifice. They're gonna burn her alive as a bride to what they call the first prophet, which is basically they're gonna marry her to Lucifer in the flames and commit her to eternal damnation. And they're like, when's this going to happen? And he's like, well, it always happens on a full moon around Halloween, which is tonight. So it's probably happening right now. And of course, Emily Deschanel's like, I'll go and save her. And the cop's like, well, I got to take him in to get a sworn statement. So he takes him in. So he doesn't go and save the girl. He takes him back to the police station, gets a sworn statement, sits there and drinks coffee and has like a 30-minute scene with the girl who's interested in him, the deputy or whatever at the police station, drinking coffee. And then he's like, oh yeah, I better go and see what's happening. The May Queen girl has done this ritual with white roses. She is chosen as the Carrie, they even go as Carrie, as Gemini twin Carries to the Halloween dress-up ball. And then at the like prom or whatever, she steals the sister's boyfriend and the mom's dress and diamonds and goes and wins prom queen or whatever. And then when they choose her, they give her they're supposed to give her a bouquet of red roses, but instead they give her white roses. And then the sister thinks she's freaked out and she's been taken by the cult. But that she's probably done this herself. And it turns out on the video camera she has. And one of the things, shouts out to BHM because she was talking about roses recently. Base Homeschool Mom, shouts out to BHM. She was talking about the ritual significance and symbolism of roses, and that occurs in the show because like when they're doing the ritual like washing or whatever before they burn the girl, all the girls like sit around and there's a bowl of like milk and they have to like squeeze the thorns of the rose and their blood drips into it, and then they wash the girl's feet with it. So it's an inversion. It's an inversion of the washing of the feet. And they're trying to prepare her for this, damnable ritual. And so then but then the May Queen girl like helps them to find the cult. They get there, and then when she gets there, May gets taken by the cult again, and she's prepared for this final burning ceremony. But then they end up, the Emily Deschanel accidentally burns down their satanic temple, and then they're like, oh no, we can't let anything get in the way of this ritual. But then they go and they try and save the temple. They have water stations at the place. Why would they try and save the thing from burning when their whole thing is burning and they're about to do a ritual involving burning and they're all going to burn anyway? It doesn't make sense. It's just a hole in the plot. So then like the weird like GMAC's mother, who is always obviously the worst one, gets up on this platform and like she like takes the place of the girl, and then she burns to death, and they have this ritual or whatever. And then in the end, they get away, and then it's resolved because, oh, we found their abandoned cars. They just pulled up stakes and they moved, and the whole cult moved somewhere. They're all gone. But the May Queen girl is now like living with Emily Deschanel because the family has split up. The normal people went with the dad, and the weird girl went with the weird mom. And then at the end, it turns out that, oh, maybe we'll have a sequel because she lives, right? And she was the bad one all along. So that's the show, right? And I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is just par for the course. It's par for the course, and it's interesting because it does deal with cults, and it's kind of Wicker Man. It's kind of Wicker Man, Hereditary. There's all these Carrie, Stephen King. There's all these other elements within the show, but it's I mean it was interesting. It was interesting to watch because it's just more revelatory. Right out in the open Satanism, and I mean it's not like figurative. It's not even like you don't even have to read into this. This was just blatant. Like it reminded me of not Clarissa Explains It All. What's the other one that they redid? The one with the witch. Where they got the Baphomet like right in the show. You guys, what is it? The remake of the Melissa Joan Hart show. Which is much darker. Anyway, this was like the same, but they blatantly mention, their cult is just on the surface, Lucifer. I mean, they even have a lawyer come to the cop station. He's like, yo, you're infringing on their religious freedom because, they were going to sacrifice this girl, and, you got to let them because you're in America, right? My freedoms. And I just, it's obviously just Sabrina. Thank you, shouts out to Countess. Thank you, Countess. And Sabrina, not Sabrina the Bogey movie or the remake with Harrison Ford. Have you guys seen that? It was by not Sidney Lumet. It was by anyway, whatever. I won't get into that. It's a romantic comedy involving an elite who has an arranged marriage and wants to dominate somebody from the poorer classes, right? And he flies her off to Paris for an Eyes Wide Shut ceremony. Anyway, all this shit it gets to be too much. But, it was just more, because of the fact that this was aimed at a YA audience, I just thought that it was, more evil, just more sickness, and there is I mean, like, even at the end, the May Queen like girl, she prays, but she still doesn't. Is she still praying to Lucifer? Who was she praying? She doesn't pray to God or pray to Christ. She doesn't. She's just like offers this weird kind of ambiguous prayer, like as if she's been redeemed, but I guess they got to leave room for a sequel. Anyway, so that's Devil in Ohio. And that ties into, there is let me find this article. This was Jeffrey Lundgren. Jeffrey Lundgren and the Kirtland cult executed 5 of their own. And they were a Mormon church in Ohio. And basically, yeah, let's see. This says Lundgren claimed to be a prophet and asked his followers to financially support him. He was in the LDS church. Let's see. Machine guns. He's the guy that claimed he was the prophet and like a son of God. And they were getting ready for the end of days, and they demanded a blood sacrifice and sacrificed a family. I think they were well-to-do. I'm sure they were mixed in with FEDS. And anyway, so that's how that goes. All right, so moving on from there, why don't we discuss? Let's see. Why don't we discuss Fatal Vision? We'll just talk a little bit about Fatal Vision. This is a book by Joe McGinnis. So this involves, I'm not going to go too long with it, but, and a lot of you may know about this. Fatal Vision also obviously comes from our very first stream that we did. Remember we talked about Macbeth and art thou not fatal vision, a dagger of the mind, right? It comes from Macbeth's soliloquy right before he kills Duncan. It's a fatal vision because he has a vision of a dagger, the air-drawn dagger. So he's literally seeing the instrument of fatality. It's also the instrument of his own doom. And what happens in this is a true story, it's a true crime. What happened was in the 70s at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, a well-off, handsome, a good-looking, successful Green Beret Colonel named who was a doctor supposedly woke up in the middle of the night and witnessed a group of 4 people in a satanic cult murdering his wife and 2 daughters. This actually, the murders occurred, okay? And one of them was this girl, Helena Stokely, that he witnessed. She was dark looking, schizoid, had like a white floppy hat and big boots, and she was saying some bullshit like acid is groovy, or something like that he claimed. Now that's what lends an air of non-credibility, right? Kind of destroys his credibility that anybody was actually there. But it turns out, because that's what we blame the murders on, and what ended up happening was he got off because they didn't have enough evidence. But then they tried him, and then he was convicted. And what I actually think happened was that he was tied in with this cult because there was a girl named Helena Stokely. Who was a local on Fort Bragg. She was the daughter of a general, a successful, he was a Green Beret general, and she was in an actual satanic cult that was responsible for all of the heroin distribution at the base, and they were trafficking heroin, and amongst other drugs. They were also responsible for acid distribution, PCP, all this other stuff. But she knew Jeffrey MacDonald. And I think what ended up probably happening was that he was somehow, the investigators didn't get this. This is my speculation, that he was tied in with this. And whether they were there or not, I tend to think that maybe this was something he was into, and he was part of the ritual. And then, or maybe he was set up and he wasn't involved in the actual thing. Or I think, or he actually did. I mean, so what happens is they couldn't immediately convict him because the scene had been washed, like before the cops even arrived, before the MPs arrived, because he had like washed his fingerprints off of the knife and they were like, why would you do that? And he was like, I pulled a knife out of my wife and I had the knife in my hand. And they're like, so why did you go into the sink and wash it and like take out like rubber gloves and wash your hands and and put it in the dishwasher or something? And he was like, I just don't even know. And then he had all these psychiatrists examine him, and they basically said that he was a narcissistic. He had narcissistic personality disorder, schizoid, and psychopathy. And Ted Gunderson was involved in the investigation, and Ted Gunderson really went with the satanic cult implications of this, right? And they found Helena Stokely, and they tried to get her to make a statement, but the problem was every time she would make a statement, she would contradict herself, and that's obviously due to the fact that she was, schizoid, DID, and was part of this cult and was completely out of her mind on drugs and all this other stuff, and with a fractured mind. But her original statement was that she was there and that she did it. The daughter was like the youngest daughter was a child. She was stabbed like 37 times. The other daughter, who was like 2 years older, was stabbed, 40 times. The wife was, I mean, it was a brutal murder. It was absolutely brutal. And the worst part, well, that's the worst part. But the worst part in terms of his own, guilt was that afterwards, like he spent all this money and he like lived the high life in New York and he was hanging out with like movie stars and stuff. Obviously, this always fits in. And famously, the parents of his parents-in-law were on his side for all this time, and then finally got clued in and were like, no, we think that this guy's a monster. He's the one who did it, and they pursued it until he was convicted. But he still is alive, and he still proclaims his innocence, obviously. But just some excerpts from the book. I mean, it's a true crime, but it's almost 1,000 pages, and it's a pretty easy read. And it's a true crime book, a true crime novel. It doesn't go into depth in a true analysis. It's simply trying to kind of tell the story. And there's even a movie about the making of the book and the writing of the book, because it's such a huge. I mean, it's a hugely successful book. But I was interested in all the elements that he brings in. He, like, for instance, on page 57, an accompanying story described the rapidly worsening drug problem in the Fayetteville area, the result of American soldiers smuggling back large quantities of narcotics from Vietnam. The county sheriff was quoted as saying that more heroin arrests have been made in the 6 months leading up to the murders than in the preceding 15 years. This ties in, obviously, with Alfred McCoy's politics of heroin, and with everything in sort of Vietnam and post-Vietnam Golden Triangle. Remember what happened to Gunderson? Gunderson was, he died. He was the head of the L.A. FBI field office. He's one of the guys who was constantly saying that there were tunnels under McMartin, and it turns out in the FBI declassified files that, of course, that there were tunnels. And he's the one who's, the whole sort of satanic panic was built around Gunderson and what he said and trying to discredit him. But you remember how he died. He died suddenly, and they said, oh, he had a heart attack. Then they did an autopsy, and they found he had high levels of mercury poisoning. Let's see, a couple other elements in here. Let's see, Helena Stokely admitted to drug use. The psychiatrist said using Seconal, heroin, and many other drugs, she said she would shoot up almost constantly. She said this had been going on for almost 2 years. She admitted she was admitted there in the psychiatric institute in North Carolina on April 17th and placed on a methadone withdrawal schedule. She told admitting psychiatrists she'd been taking everything available, including heroin, opium, LSD, cocaine, methadone, and barbiturates. She was depressed and reclusive. She had felt outside herself on page 322, eliminate, confirm, page 322, and at times had felt that someone was standing over her with a knife about to kill her. She was diagnosed with narcotics addiction and a schizoid personality. She wrote to one of her former female roommates that she said, I'm in deep, deep trouble with the CID. Remember how I didn't have an alibi for the night of the murder? Well, our dear next door neighbor stepped up and pinned the blame on me once again. I know I did mescaline that night and borrowed somebody's blue Mustang. Do you remember who owned the car? All I remember is I took off and came back about 4:30. They have enough circumstantial evidence against MacDonald to try him for murder, but first they have to rebuke Posey's testimony. He saw me leaving that car, but I'm sure I don't know where I was. She was acquainted with a freelance artist named Jane Ziliou, and they never found the other members. Well, they didn't find the other members of the cult until after they were dead. They were all found dead, of course. And let's see what else. She'd been she had been injecting heroin and liquid opium intravenously 6 to 7 times a day, along with angel dust. But that's because she was part of this cult. That who knows if her dad was in it, right? Her dad was this Green Beret general. Jeffrey MacDonald knew her. He had been spotted with her beforehand, I think, and and there are a bunch of other elements in this. They're talking about Jeffrey MacDonald here on page, let's see, 824. In all the orthodox psychoses, Hervey Checkley had written in The Mask of Sanity, there is more or less obvious alteration of reasoning processes or of some other demonstrable personality feature. In the psychopath, this is not seen. The observer is confronted with a convincing mask of sanity. All the outward features of this mask are intact. It cannot be displaced or penetrated. Examination reveals not merely an ordinary two-dimensional mask, but what seems to be a solid and substantial structural image of the sane and rational personality. The observer finds verbal and facial expressions, tones of voice, and all other signs we have come to regard as implying conviction and emotion and the normal experiencing of life as we know it ourselves and as we assume it to be in others. Only very slowly and by a complex estimation of judgment based on multitudinous small impressions does the conviction come upon us that despite these intact rational processes, these normal emotional affirmations, and their consistent application in all directions, we're dealing here not with a complete man at all, but with something that suggests a subtly constructed reflex machine which can mimic the human personality perfectly. So perfect in this reproduction of a whole and normal man. Sorry, I got to read through my highlighting. And normal man that no one who examines him in a clinical setting can point out in scientific or objective terms why or how he is not real. And yet we eventually come to know or feel we know that reality in the sense of full, healthy experiencing of life is not here. Man, coughing, y'all. Jeez. About to die in here. Better put down this Marlboro. Wow. Excuse me. That's embarrassing. They say he's a psycho killer. So, man. So look. I wouldn't be surprised if Bret Easton Ellis took that directly for American Psycho. Remember, I am simply not there. And what I think is that MacDonald was a psychopath who was also in cahoots with this group. Somehow, this this had something to do with compromising or with a ritual or with drug trafficking at the base at Fort Bragg. Remember the whole thing with the J covered with the ONA, right? The Order of Nine Angles, and the Green Beret. Was it a Green Beret? It was definitely an Army guy who was selling secrets to the ONA and for the supposed takeover of certain things. Of course, that group was also tied in with the FEDS, obviously. But there's, it's well known that, especially at Fort Bragg, that there are specific cults and circles within circles, especially dealing with the occult, right? And I don't think it's a stretch to say that he was part of this. We get Ted Gunderson on page 864. Ted Gunderson, the detective's name was Ted Gunderson. He had spent 28 years with the FBI, having retired as head of the agency's Los Angeles division earlier in 1979. Have you seen the show, the other Netflix show, Mindhunter, right? And the head detective is named Ted. I always thought that was based on Ted Gunderson. And the walls of the Wilshire Boulevard office were crowded with autobiographical pictures of such people as Gerald Ford, Johnny Carson, J. Edgar Hoover, Ronald Reagan, Jerry Brown, Walter Matthau, Steve Garvey, Roger Staubach, and John Wayne. Ted Gunderson was a straight up guy with a good reputation and years of service. He wasn't some kook. Of course, they made him out to be that when he did this investigation and found of his own accord that these ritual murders were taking place. It says, let's see. They finally find that the guy is a subhuman type of person. He's a creep. And and that he is just unrepentant. But anyway, yeah, he's still in prison and still proclaiming his innocence. But I think it's interesting because shouts out to Penny out there. Shouts out to Jason, David, Penny, Green Feathers, everybody who's out there. Thanks for dropping the links in there, TGF. Appreciate you. You guys, if you want to support me, please do so. And before I forget, let me give a shout out to some of the people that have supported me over the last week. And of course, we had to go last time before I could give shouts out to some of the people who supported me, who super chatted me, because we had a bunch of streams that night. JD was streaming and everything. And also the dog was hungry. I had to go. So I might have gotten to some of these people, but shouts out to Countess. Alan McIntyre dropped $5. Jason, Tannel, let's see, Adam Hirsch. Shouts out to Logos Kingdom Inc., who dropped $100. Fat chat for me. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you out there. Thank you so much for supporting me for that $100. Shouts out especially to Countess for that $30. Shouts out to TGF, our homeboy Green Feathers, for $20. Really appreciate you. Shouts out to Ivan, $30. Andrew Martin, who dropped $20. And let's see. Somebody else dropped $5. Can't read that one. But thank you all, everybody who supported me. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for supporting me. Yeah, the dog was hungry, and I had to go on that stream. So anyway, that's just a short little stream, you guys. And I really wanted to look. If you're, I don't know if you guys are into true crime or not. I mean, usually, we get a lot more through. I think it's important to read true crime for one angle on this stuff, and to also watch movies and read fiction, because we get an idea of the truth, right? Because the facts, ma'am, is what are the facts, right? Who is delineating the facts? Who's looking at the evidence? And I think that this book, especially, I mean, this is like the complete true crime. There's this, and there's like. You remember Ann Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me, which is the Ted Bundy biography? That one, I read that one in sixth grade. And, I always thought that was interesting, but it's, even then I thought it was a little strange that she is taken so much into Ted's confidence, and that it ends up that she's covering, who was she covering for? She was friends with was she a typist at the FBI before that? And it turns out that, she doesn't cover all these things, right? For instance, she never covered the fact that, that Ted Bundy, remember how Ted Bundy was pen pals with Manson and Son of Sam? And I think that was before the Son of Sam murders, Berkowitz. She doesn't cover that. Remember how Bundy helped solve the Green River killer? That's where Silence of the Lambs comes from, right? Because he was on death row in Florida for about to go up to Old Sparky, right? He's about to go on Old Sparky, and they couldn't solve the Green River killings, and they said, "Look, we'll let you see the case file. We're not going to give you anything out of this. We're not going to reduce your sentence." But maybe we can get an insight into your mind. And Ted Bundy said, next time you find a body, don't disturb it. Don't disturb the crime scene. Just put surveillance, and you'll find out who it is, because this guy's a NECRO file, and he will go back. And that's exactly what they did, and that's exactly how they caught him. I'm not saying Ted Bundy is a good guy. He's a demon, right? But I'm just saying that Ann Rule didn't cover it. And it's hard to get a complete picture of some of these people. I think that Jeffrey MacDonald is obviously guilty. I think he took part in this ritual murders, but what he said and then what Helena Stokely said they're all different things. I think one of the interesting things in the book is actually how they called his brother as a character witness, and his brother had no contact with him. His brother hated him. But he had been a Nam. And his brother came back, and they put him on the stand, and they said, will you be a faithful witness on everything you say here? And he basically said, no, I won't be. I hate the government, and everything that you guys stand for and what you did to me and for this whole war. I think it's bullshit, and I'm not going to say anything to you. In fact, I'm going to answer every question you give me with a question. This guy was like Ron Swanson in real life. You remember when Ron Swanson? You guys remember when Ron Swanson was a government witness, right? And he answered every question with a question, and they said he was free to go. Anyway, I know it's not funny, yeah. So that covers Fatal Vision, and the only reason I wanted to cover that was because it dealt with the cult, and it dealt with the occult and with an actual cult that tied in a little bit, not really, kind of tentatively, but the whole thing ties in, right? And with Netflix, and of course Netflix, has been promoting this. They've done a series of Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer films, especially the one dramatizing Ted Bundy and played by Zac Efron. And he's this handsome guy and all this bullshit. So anyway, that's all I wanted to cover for today. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate you. I just want to do a quick afternoon stream. We got a bunch coming up this week. We're going to get right back into literature. I'm reading a few books right now. I'm not going to say what they are, but I'm reading a few books that we're going to cover this week. And shouts out to Jack out there, our homeboy Jack, always supporting us for that $5 for the Norm Halloween candy reference. For y'all, we're coming up on Razor Apple Day. I mean, it's about 2 months away. And of course, for Spooktober, trademark JD, we're going to be. I haven't said this yet, but I don't think I said it, but I'm gonna say it right now. For Razor Apple Month, we're gonna be covering Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, and the Francis Ford Coppola film, and we'll have a bunch of other stuff to do for that month also, right? So that'll be cool. And we got a bunch of other stuff coming up this month. We got some birthdays. My own birthday coming up. Cotel, Coteasy. TGF, Green Feathers, we're all about in the same couple of days in there. So definitely for birthday, we'll have like a birthday stream, maybe a call in, I don't know. And we got some other big things coming up. And then of course, when we get up to 1,000 subs, we're going to do a Caddyshack stream and a bunch of other stuff. So thanks y'all. That's about all I got. Thanks to everybody who's here. I love you. Thanks for supporting me. And if you are watching this as you're, going back from, Florida or tonight after you're chilling out from the big JD event. Hope y'all had fun. What's up to you down there? God bless you. I love y'all and hope everybody's having fun.